We were called to do a hive removal in an apartment complex wall locally. For this particular case, the landlord had called a couple years earlier for a hive removal in the same spot. So the woman here seen removing the hive and doing most of the work had previously removed a hive from the wall in this spot. And that's pretty common. Bees will come back to spots that they have been in before. So she started with a little smoke to let the bees know that there was going to be activity happening. And I speed up here that you'll see the wall removal and continue smoking. And inside were some fairly established combs. She was looking for the queen as she pulled pieces out, and typically you don't see the queen right away. If there's activity going on in there, she'll run away from it. So we were in a small apartment room, obviously, and there were bees flying around, but most of them just stuck around the windows. It wasn't like we opened up the wall and the swarm comes flying out and attacking us. I've noticed with hive removals that the bees don't really care what you're doing until you really get going. They just think it's business as usual. So as we get deeper into removal, we see comb that maybe has resources like honey or pollen, and we want to try to keep those, but most of all we want to try to keep the brood comb, which is this big piece you see coming out right now. In this case, we tied inside an empty frame. The bees will chew off the string after they have attached the comb to the empty frame. And notice how they're just sitting on top doing their own thing. They're not attacking us. They're just gently flying around, really focused on what they're doing. Kind of speed it up here. So as that's me working on getting the brood attached. Here's another sheet of it, alive and healthy. And now the vacuum. So you try to get most of the comb out, vacuum as you go if you can. But in this case, keeping the brood on the pieces of comb worked out for us because we had an empty hive there. We could pop them right in. But there's a lot of bees, and so it helps to contain many of them, especially ones flying around and sitting in the window trying to get out. So that's what is happening. This wasn't a huge hive, but it wasn't tiny, and we didn't know the extent to where all the comb was. So as we go, you're getting bees off, you're getting a better idea of what growth that has happened inside, and make sure that we can get to all the bees and get them out successfully. I put some comb on the top of the empty hive frames there just to get them to walk off, try to get them to go inside where the brood was, which they do. They're just hanging in there. So we continue to get comb, but most of the brood was in those two frames. There's just a little patch of bees hanging out. They're wondering what's going on. I want to put those guys in the hive, so I just kind of set it there. And I'll also do a gentle tap and it'll knock all the bees off and they'll kind of instinctively go down into the box. Start to vacuum the bees from the window area and continue to clean out that pocket. Continually looking for the queen. Once you find the queen, if you can get her in a queen clip, all the hard work is done with collecting those bees. They will follow her religiously. So we did not find her at this point. That's me explaining to the tenant who wanted to watch everything what they're actually looking at there. A piece of comb with brood in it. Kind of talking about how the bees act and what he was seeing. You can see a side view of how the larvae, the white parts there, are little larvae sitting at the bottom of their cells. There was some honey in the comb, but they did not have a lot of reserves. So there's the bees in the vacuum. This is a homemade vacuum that worked out really well. The bees tolerated the procedure without damage. So we got the comb out that we could see, but there was this corner that we kept getting bees from and we weren't sure if they were going up into the ceiling and more higher up into the wall. So as we moved along, we kept wondering, how far does this go? And upstairs, there was no warmth on the wall. There was no indication that the hive was higher up. And eventually we looked out the window. You could see where they were coming into, and there was a small patch of bees clustered on the outside right there where she's vacuuming. So she had an extender on her vacuum and was able to get the cluster that was covering that hole right there, and that's how they were getting in. And you can see a few stragglers up there. We didn't see the queen, so we assumed that we had vacuumed her up. But yeah, that was a pretty big hole, which the landlord immediately closed so that this wouldn't happen again. But yeah, there they are in the vacuum. And to plug the hole on the vacuum end there, we shoved some comb in the end just to keep the bees from running back out. And there we are, loading the bees up in the hive and ready to go. That's pretty much it. It was a successful removal, and the whole procedure lasted about an hour. The tenant was happy, and so was the landlord. The hive was relocated, and so far is doing well.